Okay, welcome to NATRC's Let's Ride seminar series. This one is called, and if I can get my page down to work, and now it doesn't want to work. Oh, golly. Anyway, the basics of balance for equitation. And what is equitation anyway? Why is equitation such a large percentage of the points on the horsemanship scorecard? Why is it so important? And simply put, equitation is riding in balance on a moving horse. And it's important to the distance riders because it provides the most comfort for the rider and the horse and the most safety for both horse and rider. To start out with, Jamie Dietrich is going to give us a brief history of equitation.
And and you can go to the next one, please. There we go. Okay. So many of us have wondered where the concepts of equitation came from. And we often hear that they came from Xenophon in ancient Greece, but we seldom take time to read what he had to say. And a lot of it is really quite interesting and quite appropriate. For example, this excerpt, when mounted, the rider should sit on the horse, not as if he were sitting on a chair, but as if he were standing with his legs apart. This will allow him to hold on with his thighs, and the upright position will allow him to throw a javelin with greater power. Remember that? The lower legs should hang loosely from the knee, as a stiff leg is more likely to break should it collide with an obstacle. The rider's body above his hips should be supple, as he will be able to move more easily when fighting and will be less likely to be unseated if he is shoved. The left arm of the rider should be held against his side, giving him the greatest freedom and the firmest hold of the reins. This position is still considered the classically correct way to sit on a horse, regardless of the type of riding performed. So horses have served many purposes through the ages. Saddles with a solid tree didn't come about till about 100 AD. The stirrups came from the Chinese in about 500 AD. Nail-on shoes were in widespread use by about 1000 AD. And although horses were used for a variety of things, military use was this, and maneuverability was important. And even then it was recognized that the rider affected the way the horse traveled. The training at the Spanish riding school was based on classical dressage. It involved military traditions going back to Xenophon, and again, athleticism and agility were primary. There was, for a time, many thought that when a horse was jumping, that the rider could help the horse by sitting back when the horse took off and leaning way back when the horse landed. I know that we've all seen pictures of this sort of thing and wondered why in the world, but that was the thinking for a while. An Italian cavalry officer named Caprilli thought that classical dressage was not practical for cross-country, and he started thinking more about the comfort of the horse, and he developed a forward seat style in the early 1900s that eventually spread across Europe. In the United States, Lieutenant Colonel John Brown at the Cavalry School at Fort Riley, Kansas, is credited with developing the concept of a forward seat in America. This eventually became the basis of hunt seat equitation that's used in today's show rings. Throughout all of this, and we could spend a whole lot of time on the history, it's fascinating, but the underlying thing that keeps recurring is that the rider affects the performance and comfort of the horse.
Okay, back to me. So the rider affects the performance. And many books have been written on this subject. This could be a college course. In fact, I'm sure it is at some colleges. We're just going to cover the basics that really pertain and help distance riders. And of course, the classical balance seat here, shown here, that is used when the horse is walking, jogging, and slow trot. The rider is vertical, perpendicular to the horse's back, and the ear, the shoulder, the hip, and the back of the rider's heel line up in a straight line. And the ideal position of the arm and the hands is the elbow hanging at your side and the elbow to the bit, a straight line through the rider's hands. This is kind of hard to achieve. Many of us hold our reins lots of different ways, in just one hand, Western style, big fat rope reins, and a lot of times we go with a loose rein, and so we don't always have this perfect line, but this is the ideal. As the horse speeds up, the upper body of the rider tends to incline forward to stay with the momentum of the horse. And in a fast trot, you will be more forward. In a canter, and especially in a gallop, the upper body will be more forward, but the rider's center of gravity, center of balance is still over their feet. We'll see some pictures of this later. Okay. The foundation for this vertical position is, it starts with the pelvis. And the pelvis needs to be in a vertical position. So you need to learn how to feel your pelvis on the horse. I like to tell my students, learn to feel your bones, ride with your bones, let gravity hold you on the horse, not grip. So if you're sitting in a hard chair, you can probably feel your seat bones. And they are actually like a rocking chair. And as you rock your pelvis back and forth, you can find a spot where it doesn't require tension either in your abs or your lower back to hold an upright position. You can just relax and you will stay upright without tension. You can relax and feel very balanced. And this is when the pelvis is in the true vertical position. You need to memorize this feel. You can do it on a flat chair or a bar stool before doing it in the saddle. But do it in your saddle and learn what it feels like. And if you need to, have a friend, get together with a friend and have them help you find this position and learn to hold it. Your back should be flat, neither a hollowed back, which I like to call the rodeo queen pose, or slumped, riding on your pockets, a lot of people call it. So you can place your hand on your back and at your belt line and feel if that part of your back is flat and not curved in or curved out. This way, good muscle tone will keep you erect and not tense muscles, which will make you sore at the end of a long ride. So learn to feel your bones supporting you, then relax and learn to move with your horse. Identify your center of gravity. And this shows placing one hand on your tummy. Hers hands are maybe a little bit high, not too bad, a little bit below your navel, and on your sacrum, on your back, that's the big flat hard bone at the back of your pelvis. And between your two hands is the center of your body, the center of gravity. This is where your spine is very thick and where it joins your pelvis. And it's deep in the middle of your body. It's not clear at the back. It's in the middle. And you need to learn to visualize your center and think about it being low and try to keep it low mentally. Don't let your center fly up into your chest. This happens sometimes when your horse jumps or takes off. So think about your center being low and in your saddle. Okay, some do's and don'ts. Be relaxed. Remember to keep breathing when you ride. Breathing can help you in a lot of different ways. You can breathe your horse past something spooky by doing deep breathing. Keeping relaxed, being the calm one. If the horse gets nervous, the horse really feeds off of you. So this is an important thing to keep in mind. Your stirrup length should be adjusted so that your knees and ankles can flex to absorb shock. I don't like to see riders with a real long straight leg reaching for the stirrup. There needs to be some angles at your knees, hips, and ankles. Keep your head up, looking ahead, down the trail. Remember, you're the far-sighted member of the team. The horse is the nearsighted one. The horse looks at the trail right in front of him. He will see where to place his feet. You don't need to worry about that. You look down the trail, which keeps your head up and balanced. Remember that your head weighs quite a bit, I think 10 to 12 pounds. And if you ride down the trail with your head cocked off to one side, you're going to get sore in your neck. You're going to weight one seat bone more than the other, and the horse may end up with a sore spot on his back. So keep that head up and don't poke your chin out or tuck it in. Rock your head back and forth and find that balance point where your head is comfortable and relaxed. Don't push on the stirrups. Just let the stirrup hold your foot. Hold your toes up and make your foot level or your heels slightly down. And don't grip with your thighs or your knees. This is what makes you sore at the end of a ride. Okay, let's talk about bareback riding. This can be very helpful to help you with balance issues and learning to feel your balance. A real good exercise to do is to partner with a friend and take turns, one being the rider and one leading the horse. And then try closing your eyes as the horse walks along. And be careful when you first do this that you don't get dizzy. But if you can do it, keep your eyes closed as long as you can. This makes you concentrate on your body parts and be more aware of what your body is doing. So first of all, of course, think about your pelvis and make sure it's vertical. Make sure your back is flat. Don't ride all slumped when you ride bareback. Keep that nice erect back and feel your seat bones move with the horse. And this is what can really be amazing. See if you can feel which hind leg is in the air and moving forward, as it will move your seat bone. And your partner who's leading the horse can help you at the beginning by telling you when the left leg is swinging forward or the right leg. And then you can get the feel of it, and you can identify how that horse is moving its feet. And some horsemanship clinicians and instructors will tell you that when the horse's hind foot is in the air is the time to give a cue. So for example, to cue for left lead, you give the cue when the horse's left hind foot is in the air, because then the horse has time to process that cue. When that foot hits the ground, he can take the correct lead. So these are some things, you know, if you want to learn all these little details about equitation, that's one of them. Let's see. Okay, then as your partner leads the horse along, move your awareness to different parts of your body and feel them moving through the air as the horse moves. Think about your head and how it floats along and how it's balanced on your horse. Think about your shoulders. Are your shoulders square, or are you advancing one shoulder? Are you slumping one shoulder? Try to identify these things. Your arms, are your elbows hanging straight down? You don't want to reach forward to the reins. Keep your elbows straight down, relaxed, because reaching forward to the reins will also twist your body. Think about your hips and how they move, your hip joints. Think about all your joints. Is the horse moving? Your hip joints, your knee joints, your ankle joints. And this is an amazing exercise to feel all this. So be sure and trade places with your partner so they get to experience it too. Okay, lateral balance. This one, I gotta center my slide. It's a little off here. I can't see all of it. This is from Donna Snyder-Smith, who's a centered riding instructor and a well-known author and clinician. And she says that 85% of riders do not pay enough attention to keeping their seat bones precisely placed evenly on each side of the horse's spine. Instead, most riders ride one-sided or off to one side in one direction or the other. Even when their seat bones are correctly placed, their upper body might not be weighted properly, and they'll have more weight on one seat bone than the other. As you can see, the rider on the left in this picture has one side collapsed of her rib cage. Her pelvis is slightly off center, and you can see the horse is reacting to that. The rider on the right is aligned properly, and so the horse is moving straight. It's interesting to note, ride I just judged recently, I saw many riders, well, not many, but at least, I don't know, 6 or 8 on an uphill that were off balance to the right. Either their saddle was crooked, or their stirrup was long, or they were riding crooked. So it really does happen, and I don't know why riders aren't more aware of this. You really need to be aware of what your body is doing, because here are the consequences. Long miles in the saddle and the horse will get a sore back, a sore loin, or sore withers, because the saddle is putting pressure more on one side than the other. And they often get girth rubs because of this. So if you're getting a girth rub and you can't figure out why, think about your balance. What the horsemanship judge observes, one stirrup looks longer. Look at this picture. See how one stirrup is longer? The saddle is not centered. It's a little hard to see the saddle in this picture, but it's easy when you're judging to see the saddle and whether it's centered. And the rider has one shoulder lower, and the upper body is not vertical. So how do you correct these problems? The first thing to check is your saddle. So check for evenness of the bars. Make sure that one bar isn't broken. It's surprising how one can ride on a saddle with a broken tree and not realize it. So check that, and check the horse's back for symmetry. Some horses have more muscle on one side than the other, and this can push the saddle off balance. This can be corrected with shims in a saddle pad, or getting a new saddle, of course, custom fit to your horse. But this is a place to start to check and see if this is what's causing you to ride off balance. And then check your stirrup length. Measure with a measuring tape, don't just eyeball it, and see if they're the same length. When you mount always from the left side, the left stirrup leather can become stretched over time. Now, if you have an English saddle, maybe once a year you can switch the leathers to the other side, and that will keep them stretching in a balanced way. If you have a Western saddle and you can't do that, you may have to punch new holes, or at least adjust the holes on one side as that left stirrup leather gets stretched. So that's something to check with a measuring tape. Then check the saddle after you mount. If you pull the saddle off to the left when you mount, or to the right with an offside mount, look down after you get in the saddle and make sure the saddle is in the middle of the horse and hasn't been pulled off and you've left it off. Make sure that you straighten it. Okay. Then correcting your body position. You will need help again with an observer, a friend, or an instructor. And they can check your position with the horse standing, walking, trotting, both coming toward them and moving away. And observe if you're centered in the saddle, if your shoulders are level, if your spine is straight, if your head is centered. Having a video made of your riding can be very, very helpful, and you can see exactly what you're doing. Again, we'll review the foundation, the vertical pelvis and straight back. Identify and feel your bones and your joints. Feel that you have even pressure on both seat bones. Balance your head. And then here's an exercise I'd like to teach you called the hand over head exercise. I've taught this to a lot of people in clinics and lessons through the years. And sometimes I even see one of my students riding down the trail doing this exercise because it really does help straighten you if you get in the habit of riding slumped to one side. You can do this sitting in your chair and get the feel of it, but you do this on the horse when it's walking. Start with one hand or the other, doesn't matter which. I like to start with if I know one side of my body is tight or I'm slumping that direction, I like to start with that side, then do the other side, then come back and do the slumped side again and end with it. Bring your hand up along your center line with your thumb towards your body, past your navel, straight up. Do it slowly, past your nose. Bring it straight up over your head, and then move your arm out to where it's coming straight up from your shoulder. Keep your thumb pointed towards the horse's tail. Now, as the horse walks along and you're moving, allow that side of your body to lengthen. Don't stretch it, but just feel it lengthening. Fingers reaching toward the sky, foot reaching toward the ground. Don't force anything, just let it feel longer. And after a minute or so, slowly bring your hand back to the center line and back down. And then do it on the other side. Straight up the middle, slowly, over to your shoulder, and lengthen. If you ride tight or slumped on one side, this does amazing things to straighten you out. So try it sometime when you've got to stretch a trail where you can walk for a ways. Okay, walking downhill. This is a common error that horsemanship judges catch when you're riding on a competitive ride. Walking downhill, your horse can throw you from side to side if you're just sitting there and not being aware of what you're doing. Different horsemanship judges will probably have different tips to help you with this. So if you're having a problem, be sure and ask for help. But here's my tips. Let your seat bones walk and your legs walk down the hill with the horse, but be flexible in your waist like a hula dancer and let your upper body stay still. It takes some practice, but it's not that hard. Upper body still, lower body moving. And another tip that I forgot to put on here, but you can think about finding a point down the trail to look at, which will keep your head up and your head balanced as you go down the hill, instead of looking over to the side to see where the horse is putting its feet. Remember, you don't need to do that. Let him place his feet safely and you look on down the trail. I've noticed through the years as I judge that many riders are getting better and better with this. They're learning from us judges how to correct this problem, but I still see it in some of the newer riders who haven't learned that this is an issue, that this rocking side to side going down the hill, again, can cause a sore back. Sometimes it gets worse if you're leaning back too far. You want to keep your weight forward on your thighs and not back on the cantle of the saddle so that you can do this. And some horses have great big strides that throw you more than others, so you really have to concentrate and learn how to do this. Okay, I've got some pictures here with some errors that riders are making that we can look at. Here the rider is looking down, this happens to be me, looking down over my horse's left shoulder to see where he's putting his feet. So it puts more weight on my left seat bone. And if I made a habit of doing this on a rugged trail, mile after mile, up and down hills, it would affect the horse's back and possibly a sore loin or a sore on the withers on a long ride. And you see the difference. The rider ahead has her head up looking forward. It's a little harder to see, but. And then here's another picture of where the rider has looked down to see where the horse is putting its feet, and it's thrown her off balance. Now this might be fine if you're training the horse and you want to place its feet exactly in a certain place, and if it just happens momentarily. But again, on a distance ride, think about how that shift of weight adds up and will affect the horse's back.
Priscilla, could you recenter your screen?
Okay. There, how's that? So I think everybody can see how easily that happens when you look down at your horse's feet. Okay, something we haven't talked about is posting. We don't all post. The gaited horse riders don't need to worry about this, but they still need to ride in the classic position to help their horse gait better. But here's a picture of a nice, soft, down position of the posting trot. And look at the rider's balance. There's kind of a white spot on her belt that is right at her center. And you can see that it's right above the back of her heel. She's got nice angles in her hips and knees and ankles. Her shoulders are slightly forward to stay with the momentum of the horse. And she can land softly in the saddle and not come down with a plop on the cantle by having her center over her feet. Now, in the rising part of the post, her pelvis will come forward over her feet. It'll come forward towards the pommel of the saddle, and it'll come over her feet and under her shoulders, so she will look like she's standing on the ground. I like to tell riders, posting should not be up and down. It should be forward and back feel. And you don't need to come very far out of the saddle at all. You aren't in a show ring. You're on the trail. Miles and miles of posting should be comfortable for you and the horse. And again, head balanced, looking ahead, not looking down at your horse. Okay, I think we're just about done. I included here a list of recommended reading. These are some of my favorite books. There's lots and lots of books, but I do once in a while find errors in some of them or things that I don't agree with. But these are excellent books. Riding Logic, if you can find it, it was first published, I think, in 1936 or something like that. It was published in this country in 1987. It's probably out of print, but you might still be able to find it in libraries or in used bookstores or online. A favorite is Horse Gaits, Balance and Movement by Susan Harris. She has one chapter, chapter 12, that talks about how the rider affects the movement of the horse. The rest of the book is all about the mechanics of how the horse moves, and she goes through gaited horses as well as trotting horses, all the different gaits, and it's a fascinating book. But that chapter 12 has some great pictures showing how your center of gravity should be over the center of gravity of the horse when it's going uphill, downhill, sliding stops, around barrels, over jumps, all that sort of thing. Then the United States Pony Club manuals are very good. The intermediate one I like because it covers cross-country riding. It's called Intermediate Horsemanship Sea Level, and it's written by Susan Harris. The Complete Guide to Endurance Riding and Competition by Donna Snyder Smith has some really good pictures in it, really good information on conditioning your horse as well as riding many miles in competition. And the All Around Horse and Rider by Donna Snyder Smith is also a really good one. And then, of course, the Centered Riding books by Sally Swift, the original Centered Riding from 1985 and Centered Riding 2 from 2002. Both have lots and lots of good information in them that can help you with balance and learning to move with your horse. I think we're ready for questions. What do you think? Does anybody have questions?
We have one question. When riding a green horse that spooks, I feel like I need to grip. Should I not be gripping?
Well, there probably are times when you do need to grip. You can grip with your lower leg momentarily when the horse spooks to keep you from being shifted out of the saddle, of course. Just don't make a habit of gripping all the time as you ride. But you should have reflexes enough to get that grip in when you need it, when the horse jumps sideways or turns quickly.
Okay. The next question. Go ahead.
Could I interrupt a second
Sure.
there
Yes.
on this? With the green horse, sometimes a green horse needs you to have a deep seat trail. They don't feel as secure if you're light in the saddle, and they sense an instability. So there's times to be down in the saddle for that, giving the confidence to the horse and feeling more stable. So it's not so much grip there as just your stability and confidence in the horse. And sometimes associated with this too, with the green horse, Priscilla mentioned breathing, and something that helps you breathe that can help a green horse is if you sing, because if you sing, that helps you breathe regularly and the horse senses that calmness. So there's a couple of things that I like to use with green horses on the trail.
I just lost my view, so I'm going to let other people answer things. Can we get a copy of the recommended list of reading? This video will be posted probably in the next week or so. So it will be up on the web, and it can be accessed through the NATRAC's main webpage. I may try to get a screenshot of the reading list up there sooner, but yes, a list will be available soon. The next question is tips for riding uphill. What are good tips for riding uphill?
Okay, when the horse starts going uphill, you need to shift your weight forward, more weight on your thighs to lighten your seat bones, so you aren't sitting back heavy on the cantle, which presses the back of the cantle or the back of the saddle tree into your horse's loins. A little more weight in your feet, upper body inclines more forward the steeper the hill. And really steep hills, you may need to grab a hold of a handful of mane to help you balance, and that's perfectly fine. You don't have to stand way up in the saddle with daylight under your bottom, but at least lighten those seat bones up off the cantle. The horse is struggling to go forward, working harder the steeper the hill, and so you need to be forward to help the horse use its hind legs to push. Does that help? Jamie, do you want to add anything?
I think that covers it pretty well. In the first webinar we did on horsemanship, there are some slides in the PowerPoint of that one, of uphill and downhill equitation with some of the basic pointers that can help you. So that's on the website. You can refer to that.
Right.
Okay. The next question. I also do an asymmetric sport, tennis, that I fear makes me unbalanced. What is the best way to counter that?
That's a good question. I've heard this before, that sports like golf and tennis don't mix well with equitation. You need to do sports that use both sides of your body equally. But I'm not sure how to answer that. We need somebody who's an expert on physiology of muscle development and so forth. Can you practice playing tennis with your other hand? At least in practice sessions. Probably doing things like yoga and some jogging. Jogging on a mini trampoline is a really good exercise to work both sides of your body equally. those mini trampolines you can buy really cheap at garage sales, I've found. And you can walk, trot, and canter on one of those mini trampolines. It's really, really fun to exercise on those. So that's probably the best tip I have for that.
Next question. My horse is a bit clumsy going downhill even when I am balanced. I was told on a ride that I should help balance him by using the reins. What is your advice?
Well, you should have enough contact with the reins that you can guide the horse and keep him, from turning sideways, particularly because going straight down a steep hill is the safest way to negotiate it, unless there are switchbacks, which is something different. But if you're going down a steep place, you want to go straight down. And so you do need to keep them, their body straight. One of the things you can do to develop their muscles to help them with downhill. I rode a horse years ago that was very clumsy on downhills too. And someone told me that backing up, particularly backing him in hand, would develop those muscles to help him go downhill. So whenever I got him out of the pasture, I would try to back him up several steps before I tacked up or groomed him. And again, before I turned him out, I would back him up, maybe at least 25 or 30 feet, the length of or width of the barn, something like that. And just made a habit of doing that. And it really did help strengthen his hindquarter and back muscles to help him be more stable going downhill. So that's something you might try.
Next question. How much time should a person ride bareback when they are learning to balance ride? As a fairly new rider, I am very dependent on my stirrups.
You don't have to spend a lot of time at it, but just try it, once in a while, maybe once a week for a while, ride for 20 or 30 minutes bareback around an arena if you have one, or around pen, or just around your yard. Keep it safe if you're apprehensive about it, and get used to it. And with more practice, you'll feel more comfortable doing it, I think. But you don't need to do it hours and hours at all.
I was told that your back should be slightly rounded to relieve the stress on your vertebrae.
Interesting. Your back does have a natural curve to it if you look at an anatomy book, and that is the way you're made, the way you're designed. And if your back is following those natural curves of the vertebrae, it's going to be erect and balanced. But you don't want to consciously round your back or hollow your back. You need to find that balance place where it's effortless to sit erect. I remember the first time I attended a centered riding clinic, and we worked on this and learned the feel of being straight up on your horse. And when I drove home from that clinic, I changed the position of my car seat so that I sat erect. It just felt so good to be sitting up straight instead of slumped that I wanted my car seat vertical. And it really surprised me that how much better it felt once I had learned that sitting erect instead of slumped.
Next question. I need tips on how to train my horse to travel downhill slowly. She is rushing and we are out of balance. Shall I place logs for her to contemplate? In other words, a way of slowing her down. This is the only time she truly will pull the reins out of my hand to rush through an obstacle. I have practiced this in hand and she does great, but mounted, she rushes.
Do you know what a half halt is? You need to learn a half halt, which is exactly what it says. It's not a complete halt, but it signals the horse to slow down and rebalance itself. So this is what you need to learn. You don't want to be hauling on the reins. You need the horse responsive to the rein, either bit or hackamore, whatever you use, so that they are listening to you. And practice it on flat ground first and make sure that they will listen to the slightest signal from you to slow down, hesitate. And this is, I'm not as much a horse trainer as I'm a rider trainer, but I do know this, you know, that teaching that horse to be very responsive to the rein is so key to them being obedient on the trail. And pulling the reins out of your hand is a big no-no, and they really should learn not to do that. And this starts with learning the basics of giving to the bit. So you may need to just kind of go back to basics with the horse and make sure that they're being responsive to the slightest pressure. Stop, back a step, then go forward. Stop just long enough to hesitate, rebalance, go forward. And you should be able to do this going downhill. You should be able to stop the horse at any time going down that hill that you want to. It just takes practice.
I think this is kind of a half response to another question. To help with downhill clumsiness, wouldn't learning to collect your horse so that she shifts her weight back, rounds her back, and frees up her front feet be helpful?
Yes.
That was the last question or comment.
Okay. Might give them a few seconds, see if anybody else thinks of something. Jamie, do you want to add anything to these questions, or?
No, I think that the last question, I think that was a good response to the previous question. Going downhill, you want the horse to be able to use the hindquarters. The hindquarters are the brakes, so the better the horse can do that, the better it's going to go downhill. And I liked your comment to go downhill a step, and then another step, and then another step. Check your own balance. Be sure you're not hitting on the loins, so the horse can use the hindquarters. Some of it is figuring out if there's issues that the horse is uncomfortable with that makes it want to rush down the hill. So it can be a complex thing there, and that actually was a very good question and comment, because that carries over into a lot of other riding aspects.
Yes, that's true. And be sure that you haven't fallen into the habit of leaning way back going downhill. This is something I see so often in books on Western riding and trail riding, where they say lean back on the downhills. And this isn't always the best thing for your horse. You really need to stay light in the saddle and let your weight go down through your thighs and into your knees, and not back on the cantle, and try to keep your back or your position perpendicular to the horse's back. And it may feel funny when you first start doing this. You feel like you're tipping forward, but this really makes it much easier for the horse to round their back and get their hind legs under them so that they can use them as brakes and go down the hill safely. If you're leaning back and putting a lot of pressure on their loins, their hind legs are going to get strung out behind and they aren't as useful to them. Then they're depending on their front legs to slow them down, and it's much harder for them.
Well, I think that was the last. What are, one more question, what are the best exercises to strengthen the shoulder?
The rider's shoulder, I assume, or the horse?
Vague.
Vague. That's a good question.
Strengthen the horse's shoulder so it is not like a noodle. Straighten the horse's shoulder so it is not like a noodle.
Straighten the horse's shoulder. I'm not quite sure how to answer that. Jamie, do you have an idea? I would say maybe.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say going up and down short hills if you have the opportunity. Not real steep. If you have a place where you've got slight uphills and downhills that you can go up and down, back and forth many times to get the horse learning to use their shoulder, that sounds about as good as anything.
Yeah, she added one more comment. She says, my horse sometimes falls in on the shoulder on a curve.
Okay.
So
yeah, go ahead, Jamie.
If I could interrupt, this is one area where some dressage cross-training might help, because there are certain exercises that can help that. Certain exercises that specifically address this falling in of the shoulder. And it doesn't have to be a long, involved process, but some arena work and body awareness of what you're doing and what the horse is doing can help. Maybe it's not even, it wouldn't have to be dressage, but some arena equitation addressing that shoulder falling in, because that is a common problem.
Yes, and be aware of what your body is doing. Are you leaning into the curve, which is causing it? Think about keeping your upper body erect, rotate your body into the turn. Think about like having a headlamp in your belt buckle and turn that headlamp in the direction of the turn instead of dropping your shoulder into the turn. Keep your shoulders level and rotate like a barber pole is one other visualization to turn into the corners and help keep your horse balanced. Yes, there's lots of exercises in dressage books, probably some websites that have arena exercises you can do. Lots of circles, I'm sure, or riding into square corners will help.
One of the exercises is to lift a rein at a certain time, but you really need an instructor to help you know the timing, because the timing of when you lift the rein to help the horse lift the shoulder is important. If your timing's off, you're not helping. So it's, and I think, 2 or 3 lessons could help this quite a bit. It'd be very beneficial.
Okay, I hope we've given you some help. There are some clinicians that have websites that would be helpful. I was trying to find some of them today. Susan Harris has a website and a Facebook page, and Donna Snyder-Smith, I think, does. Also, another author that I forgot to mention and clinician is Wendy Murdoch. And I don't know why I forgot her, because I took some lessons from her and she's amazing. She has a book called Simplify Your Writing, and I should have put it on my list and I forgot. Wendy, W-E-N-D-Y, Murdoch, M-U-R-D-O-C-H. And she does clinics, and she has a website called The Murdoch Method. And she has lots of really good tips for exercises you can do with your horse to improve different things that you want them to do. So that might be something you'd want to check on.
All right, I think we can call it an evening. This was the last webinar in the 2020 series for the summer. We are going to try to have one more special webinar in November, the week before Thanksgiving, but we're still working out details. The 2021 webinar series is going to fire up again in January, and we hope to see all of you. Have a good night, have a good Thanksgiving, and a good Christmas.